strange when you're a stranger. Faces look ugly.
People are strange when you're a stranger. This section is about experiences of otherness or strangeness or even irritating experiences, but also about behavior of others that surprises us and makes us wonder. And I would like to start with a thesis. In situations that make us think and wonder about others, feelings of irritation or astonishment primarily tell us a lot about ourselves. When it comes to the topic of otherness and strangeness, we are concerned with making such experiences usable for intercultural and, I would also say, interpersonal learning. A widespread understanding of intercultural communication is the communication between people from different nations. In fact, intercultural communication is about the encounter and communication between people who view each other as different, as strangers. This can occur within cultures and countries, for example with an encounter between a Bavarian farmer and a Frankfurt-based stockbroker, a young urban hipster and members of a village shooting club, or a woman from Hamburg and a man from Lower Bavaria. Strangeness can be present in the encounter between a young climate activist and a man from the baby boomer generation, or the strangeness that an elderly lady feels when her grandchildren talk about WhatsApp and social media. They all have different life paths and socialization experiences that they consider to be normal, while the world of others may be perceived as foreign. This brings us to the core of intercultural communication. It is about encounters between people who see each other as strangers. Intercultural competence is the ability to reduce the feeling of otherness. Experiencing strangeness shows us first and foremost that our own sphere of cultural normality, our comfort zone, has been left. In the second step, we can learn something about ourselves, namely what would have been normal for us. In the third step, we can learn about our counterpart, their normality, and what value orientation lies behind their words and their actions. And in the fourth step, how we can deal with the situation. So we first reverse our perspective and learn to differentiate our own experience of strangeness. We don't look at the others from whom our experience of strangeness supposedly comes, but rather at ourselves and ask ourselves, what kind of otherness do we experience? Where does this feeling of strangeness come from? Does this experience attract or fascinate us? Is it only temporary, perhaps even frightening, or is what we see simply incompatible with our moral standards? Strangeness is a feeling and can never be objective. It is always in the eye of the beholder. While the German colleague is annoyed by the French IT employee leaving his cell phone on and answering calls during a meeting, his or her Ukrainian colleague may not even notice the behavior at all. We now know about the relativity of the feeling of strangeness. This means we can use every moment in which we notice otherness and strangeness to reflect and question ourselves. What were our expectations? What are our attributions now? In other words, which characteristics do we ascribe to the other person or a person's behavior now? We look at ourselves to become aware of our own position. For the following explanation of 5 categories of otherness, photos were selected that probably do trigger these specific feelings of otherness. However, the photos were chosen by an individual and again represent a subjective selection. The category of fascinating and exotic refers to a feeling of curiosity or attraction that we feel when encountering the unknown. Such a feeling may also be the motivation to take a community college course in African dancing, to buy colorful scarves from India, or to travel to distant countries. The yet unknown category offers the chance to get to know each other. The strange can become the familiar. It seems possible to integrate the new experiences into the usual world of experience. Maybe people start cooking Indian or Thai food at home, learn a new language, or get involved with refugees, or thereby expand their experiences to include things that were unknown before. The category foreign and not from here shows a boundary between what belongs and what does not belong to our comfort zone and familiar cultural environment. It's about experiences of strangeness which we can perhaps perceive rather calmly because it is obviously a temporary experience. This can include encounters with Asian tourists here in Germany, a school or a student exchange. An example, everyone who is temporarily staying in the space that we consider ours. The category unknown and unacceptable precludes getting to know each other better for moral reasons. Underlying this feeling is a rejection of the practices of others. For example, many Europeans may feel a strong sense of alienation regarding child marriage, ritual practices such as circumcision, the Thai Koreans' neck lengthening, or the stoning of adulterers. Feelings in the spooky and threatening category arise from the stark contrast between the familiar and the strange. In contrast with the previous category, they do not provoke purely moral strangeness, but rather an emotional strangeness that triggers disgust or fear and relates to everyday practices such as cleaning with your left hand after going to the toilet, eating with the right hand, or drinking habits, for example. Getting close in conversations can trigger this feeling of strangeness, as can certain ritual practices. We distinguish between 5 different feelings of strangeness: fascinating and exotic, unfamiliar and yet unknown, foreign and not from here, unknown and unacceptable, spooky and threatening. Ideally, in the case of a seminar or workshop, your lecturer would now have photos from the Geo magazine or the National Geographic ready for you. With your eyes in the photos, you can simultaneously look inward and ask yourself what kind of strangeness the images trigger in you, and you will find another idea for exercises in the end of this video in the form of other videos of flash mobs, for example. How does foreignness affect intercultural encounters? Contacts and relationships with strangers are sometimes experienced as emotionally upsetting. This results from the fact that the strangers are simply strangers who have come close to us. The difference is therefore obvious and perhaps painfully noticeable. This may cause uncertainty because we don't know how to interpret smiles or gestures, how to understand something that has been said, or what to do with a certain statement. This graph does not only refer to intercultural encounters, but to encounters in general. We experience otherness and strangeness as fear, but in most cases certainly as uncertainty. In any case, we will develop a way how to deal with the situation, which is here called a strategy to overcome. By reflecting on the situation, by clarifying what our own expectation would have been and what our counterparts' assumingly normal reaction was, we can understand in depth and thereby learn. This process is then called intercultural learning. The psychologist Carl Jung said, "Everything that irritates us about others can lead to a better understanding of ourselves." Craig Stolti, a specialist in intercultural psychology, said that the average foreign traveler, even the ordinary tourist, upon returning from his stay abroad, has learned more about his own country than about the one he had just visited. Intercultural learning emphasizes the positive aspects of irritations or even conflicts through experiences of otherness. The denial of otherness and strangeness, as sometimes occurs in the discussions surrounding immigration, can quickly lead to disillusionment. The strategy of recognition, on the other hand, creates a motivation to understand other patterns of thought and action. The cultural learning model shown here is based on 6 phases that individuals go through, from ethnocentrism to ethno-relativism. Each phase shows a different attitude that learners move through, from denial to defense to minimization, and then to acceptance, and finally to adaptation and to integration. Let's summarize. Otherness and strangeness present a learning opportunity. We distinguish between 5 categories of strangeness. By reflecting on our feelings, we learn about ourselves and others. The uncertainty reduction model describes the process of intercultural learning. The cultural learning models show the 6 phases between ethnocentrism and ethno-relativism. After you have first reflected on your own feelings of otherness and strangeness using images from National Geographic or other magazines, it may be helpful to take a look at other people's experiences of otherness. You will find 3 videos linked for this exercise on YouTube or your learning platform. The first 2 are flash mobs that we conducted as part of a course. For these flash mobs, the participants went to public places and stood motionless for 3 minutes when an acoustic signal sounded. The reaction of passers-by was captured on film. In the third video, you can watch the audience's reaction to the band Kraftwerk's first techno concert in 1970. Did the people faced with otherness of this new music find the new sounds attractive and exotic, foreign and not from here, unfamiliar yet unknown, or perhaps even unacceptable, or even scary or threatening? The topic of otherness and strangeness is also related to the topic of ethnocentrism. It can be further deepened by dealing with the phenomenon of culture shock. On YouTube, I encourage you to leave your remarks in the comments and to like and to subscribe. And I look forward to your valued cooperation and feedback on the seminar on the online learning platforms.